When we think about Tudor England, we usually picture these huge rebellions, right? People rising up over crazy new taxes or big religious changes. But what if I told you that was only ever half the story? What if all those pitchforks and protests were just the tip of the iceberg, part of a much deeper, hidden war being fought in the shadows? So that's the big question, isn't it? What really truly sparks a rebellion? Is it just that people get angry enough and, boil over? Or is there something else going on? Something just beneath the surface? Well, a lot of the time, it's a fight you can't even see. It's a conflict that's not happening out in the fields, but down the corridors of power. And that's what we're going to do here. We're going to peel back that curtain and look at the secret political battles behind some of the most famous Tudor uprisings. And it all starts with why the Tudor crown was so darn shaky in the first place. See, to really get a handle on all this conflict, you have to understand one fundamental thing about the Tudors. Their crown was won, not inherited. And believe me, that made all the difference. And this right here, this gets to the very heart of the Tudor problem. On one side, you've got the theory, the divine right of kings, the idea that God himself picks the monarch, the rule is sacred. But then you have the Tudor reality, right of conquest. Henry Tudor took the crown on a battlefield, and that meant his claim wasn't sacred at all. It was basically an open invitation for anyone else to try and take it the exact same way. And this timeline, wow, it shows you exactly why. For 30 years before the Tudors even showed up, England was tearing itself apart in the Wars of the Roses. I mean, it was a real-life Game of Thrones. The crown changed hands violently, over and over again. And this taught the English nobility a really dangerous lesson. Kings could be made, and they could be unmade. So you end up with a nobility that's smaller, sure, but way more concentrated and battle-hardened. They knew power could be taken by force. And all of that instability created the central conflict of the entire Tudor age. It was a massive power struggle between the new Tudor regime and the old established noble families. Basically, new men versus old money. And what were they all fighting over? This: patronage. You have to understand, patronage was everything. It was cash, it was land, it was fancy titles, it was influence. It was the only way to get rich and powerful. If you could control the king, you controlled the whole system of patronage. It was the ultimate prize. So the Tudors knew they had a problem. They had to get a grip on these powerful old nobles. So what was their strategy? Well, first, centralize everything in London. Second, shrink the king's council down to a tight, controllable inner circle. And third, and this is the big one, promote new men. These were brilliant guys from humble backgrounds, people like Cardinal Wolsey or Thomas Cromwell, whose power came directly and only from the king. They were fiercely loyal because, well, they had nowhere else to go. And the old nobility? Oh, they absolutely hated these upstarts. This quote from the historian Polydore Virgil just nails the mood. He says Wolsey's ambition earned him the hatred of the whole people and the great irritation of the nobles. This wasn't just, a simple dislike. This was a deep, simmering rage that would end up fueling decades of conflict. So how does all this anger and resentment actually play out? Well, the nobles, who were now cut off from direct power, they needed a weapon to fight back. And they found the perfect one: the very real anger of the common people. Suddenly, rebellion becomes a noble's game. The great historian G.R. Elton, he just put it perfectly. He argued that the real fights were political, but things like religion or taxes, they provided a useful cloak. Think about that. The nobles would hide their dagger, their real goal, their own ambition, under the cloak of a popular cause that everyone could get behind. And if you want proof, look no further. This right here is the smoking gun. In 1548, Lord Thomas Seymour gives this incredibly blunt advice to another noble. He says, look, don't trust the gentlemen. They've got too much to lose. Instead, you need to get friendly with the head yeomen, the local leaders. Why? For they be the men that be best able to persuade the multitude. He even tells them how to do it. Go to their houses, bring wine and venison, get familiar with them, and you'll have them ready to go at your command. I mean, this is a top-tier Tudor lord literally giving a masterclass on how to manipulate and weaponize popular support. It's stunning. All right, so let's put this cloak and dagger theory to the test. We're going to look at how this exact strategy played out in 5 major Tudor uprisings. Okay, this table lays it all out pretty clearly. For every single rebellion, you've got the cloak, that's the public reason, the thing everyone was angry about, and then you've got the dagger, the hidden political motive of the powerful people fanning the flames behind the scenes.
So first up, the amicable grant in 1525. The cloak was a hugely unpopular and, frankly, illegal tax that the new man, Cardinal Wolsey, was pushing. The popular anger was totally real, and it was fierce. But the dagger? Well, powerful nobles like the Dukes of Norfolk and Suffolk, who despised Wolsey, were ordered to shut the riots down. But what did they do? Pretty much nothing. They just let the chaos grow because they knew that every second the riots went on, their political rival Wolsey looked worse and worse to the king. It was a political hit job, pure and simple, just disguised as a tax revolt.
Next, the Pilgrimage of Grace. This was the biggest rebellion the Tudors ever had to deal with. 30,000 people took up arms. The cloak here was this righteous, genuine fury over Henry VIII tearing down the monasteries. But the dagger? That belonged to the Aragonese faction. These were the nobles who lost all their power and influence when Henry divorced Catherine of Aragon. They saw this huge wave of religious anger as their one big chance to topple the new chief minister, Thomas Cromwell, and claw their way back to power. Then you've got the tragic story of Lady Jane Grey. Now, this wasn't really a popular uprising, but it is a perfect example of this kind of elite manipulation. The cloak was about preserving the Protestant faith by putting Jane on the throne instead of the Catholic Mary Tudor. But the dagger belonged to the Duke of Northumberland. He was the most powerful man in England, and he knew that the second Mary became queen, his career, and almost certainly his life, was over. The whole thing was just a desperate, last-ditch coup to save his own skin. Just a year later, you have Wyatt's Rebellion. The cloak was patriotism. There was this huge fear whipped up about Queen Mary, and Philip of Spain, with everyone worried about foreigners taking over. But the dagger? The gentry at court were terrified that a whole new crew of Spanish Catholic nobles would show up and take all the best jobs, all the best titles, cutting them off from that precious flow of patronage. So it was a fight for their careers, just masked as a fight for England. And finally, we see the exact same pattern deep into Elizabeth's reign with the Northern Rebellion. The cloak was this noble call to restore the old Catholic faith, but the dagger was a direct hit against Elizabeth's top advisor, another one of these new men, William Cecil. The great earls of the North felt totally shut out of power by Cecil's monopoly on the queen, so they rebelled, not just for religion, but to try and break his political stranglehold on the court. From the amicable grant all the way to the Northern Rebellion. That's nearly 50 years, and you see the same pattern again and again and again. And what that tells us is that the most important war wasn't always the one fought out in the open. The real war was inside. Think of it like this. In Tudor England, there were two battlefields. You had the one out in the countryside, fought with pikes and bows by genuinely angry, everyday people. And then you had the other one, the one fought at court, with whispers and plots and backroom deals. And you know what? That second battlefield was almost always the one that truly mattered. Now, let's be crystal clear about something. The anger of the common people over their faith, their taxes, their land, that was 100% real. Their grievances were absolutely legitimate. But that powerful, authentic anger, it was the fuel for a fire that was very often started and then skillfully aimed by powerful men with their own, very different agendas. It's a pattern you see all throughout history, really. So the next time you see a crowd rising up in protest, it's worth taking a second to ask yourself, whose anger are we really seeing? And who, standing just out of sight, might actually be pulling the strings?